Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December 12th meeting of Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee. We have quorum now, so I'm going to call the meeting to order and start with a land acknowledgement. That is, the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. I see we have a few guests in the gallery today, so I just want to say welcome. It's nice to see you here, and just to remind everyone to turn off your cell phones if you have a cell phone. We are going to start today's meeting with the annual election of chair. So I will hand this over to our legislative assistant here and ask that I think my job is done, more or less now. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. I will conduct us through the election of chair, and then the new chair will carry us through the election of our vice chair, following the same procedure as set out. So I will begin by opening the floor to nominations, and then following the receipt of nominations, if there is one member nominated for the position, that person will be acclaimed. If there are multiple nominations, we will have an election by way of secret ballot. I will call 3 times once there's a lull in the process for requesting nominations, just to ensure that we have heard any and all possible nominations for candidacy. Any member can nominate any other member. It just requires a seconder. So if there are no questions at this time, I'll open the floor for nominations. Are there any nominations for the position of chair?
I have one, Mr. Clerk. Thank you. I believe, although she's not here, I know she's in the building, Kathy Daigle-Gammon had an interest in running. What's the process for someone who may not be here?
Pardon? I think there's no problem with nominating a member who is not here, but I think you'd probably want to be pretty certain that they do indeed want the role.
Okay, yes, I am certain, so I'll be nominating Kathy.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you. Thank you. Are there any further nominations for the position of chair? Are there any further nominations for the position of chair? Asking for a third and final time, are there any further nominations for the position of chair? Hearing none, can I request a motion to appoint Kathy Daigle-Gammon as the chair of the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee? Thank you. Are we ready to call the question? Commence voting. Vote by hands. Yep, all in favor. Any opposed? Thank you. I'm happy to announce that Councillor Daigle-Gammon has been appointed to chair. This does raise a bit of an issue that we will still require, I believe, our acting chair at this time until we have a vice chair that could carry us through the election. I guess what makes sense is I'll carry us through the election of our vice chair, and then at that point, that person can take over the role of chair, if that is okay. Can I request, are there any nominations for the position of vice chair?
I would like to nominate Councillor Steele.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you. Are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? Are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? Thank you. Are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? Hearing none, can I request a motion to appoint Councillor Steele as Vice Chair of the Community Planning? Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you. I'm happy to announce that Councillor Steele has been appointed Vice Chair of the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee, and I will pass the Vice Chairmanship position to Councillor Steele at this time, and you can take the podium and chair the meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Let's move to the next item of the agenda, which is for the approval of the minutes of September 19, 2024. So you're moving. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Cuddle moved, and Councillor Purdy moved, and Councillor Cutter second. No. Purdy and then back. No, you're standing. Are there any errors or omissions? Can we call for the question? All those in favor of signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. Okay, the motion carries. The next item on our agenda is approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Are there any further changes to the order of business? Or any changes, I should say.
Thank you, Chair. There have been no requests for additions or deletions as received by the Clerk's office.
Okay. So I'll call for a motion to approve the order of business. Okay, Councillor Cuddle moved this time, and Councillor Purdy is the seconder. Okay, I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hands. Perfect. The motion has carried. Is there any business arising out of the minutes?
Thank you, Chair. I believe there is none.
Okay, thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest that people would like to declare? No conflicts of interest. Any motions of reconsideration? None. Okay. Motions of rescission? None. Consideration of deferred business? None. And notices of table matters? None. We're now at the item of correspondence. I will ask the clerk if we've received any correspondence.
Thank you, Chair. There has been no correspondence received to be circulated to the Standing Committee.
Okay, thank you. Are there any petitions to be presented by the councillors? Okay. We're now at the presentations, and the University of King's College Southeast Corner project update. And I will invite William Leahy, President of the University of King's College, and Martin Davidson, Principal of Diamond Schmidt Architects, to come forward and present, please. And our legislative assistant will time the presentation and hold up signs when we have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Chair. There will be 10 minutes permitted for the presentation, and then there will be time after that at the discretion of the Chair for questions.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay, yes, it's working. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for giving myself and Martin the opportunity to present to you on what we call the Southeast Corner Project. If you know the King's Quad, you know that there's a gymnasium in one corner of the quad. That is the southeast corner, and hence the name of the project. The project is to replace that charming but woefully out-of-date gymnasium with a modern gymnasium, and also the new building would include teaching and learning space for our School of Journalism, Writing and Publishing, and there would also be additional residence space created at the King's campus with the Southeast Corner Project. We're very, very determined to create a building that is good for King's, in fact, vital to the future of King's, but a building that is good for the community as well. In other words, a building for Halifax and indeed beyond Halifax. That's very, very important to us. Something else that's very, very important to us is a building that not only is compatible with the existing architectural heritage and beauty of our campus, but enhances the beauty of our campus. And I think that is the primary reason we're here to talk about the project today, because we're interested in opening a conversation about options we might have under relevant zoning and plans to design the building that achieves all the objectives we have for it, including the ones I've just mentioned, but is also an enhancement of the King's campus. So this is the team that's working on the project, and you see Martin, who leads the component of the team from Diamond Schmidt. Martin will speak to you on the details in a few minutes. I want to emphasize Jane Abbott and colleagues from Abbott Brown, an architectural firm located here in Halifax. And then down below, you see the various sub-consultants, including many that come from Halifax and Nova Scotia, and the engagement team. And we're going to talk about this in a moment, because engagement with the Mi'kmaq community and the African Nova Scotia community, the media community and the writing and publishing community, the recreational community, these are all fundamentally important parts of this project. So overall, the objective is a building which contributes to the mission of King's for educational excellence and community engagement within a 21st century context. Our core buildings at King's are 100 years old. We just celebrated their anniversary, so we're looking forward to the next century with this building. We want to contribute to increasing the availability of student housing in Halifax by increasing on-campus residential opportunities. The residential experience is fundamental to the King's experience, and we would love to have more King's and students from other universities sharing the life of King's by having more facilities for them. We want to create a new student fitness and wellness center, including a gymnasium. Varsity sports is a very, very important part of our educational model at King's, but also our gym is used by a wide range of users of recreational facilities at King's, and many of the people who know the King's Gymnasium, they know it because their kids played basketball or volleyball or badminton at King's. We want a campus hub that is both Rick Hansen and LEED Gold certified. Accessibility is a real challenge at King's. We have a very ambitious accessibility plan. We see this project as making a very significant, substantial contribution to accessibility at King's, as well as sustainability of the college from an environmental and an economic point of view. The core rationale for the building is King's is dedicated to its mission in teaching future generations of journalists We think this is a core contribution of our university to the public good. Journalism is about the well-being of civic life and our democracy, and King's is into journalism education for the long term. But right now, our facilities do not reflect the way in which journalism has evolved or is going to evolve in the future, and creating a space that anticipates the evolution of journalism and how it's practiced is a core objective. This project is about advancing our relationship with the Mi'kmaq, and therefore it's a contribution to reconciliation. The Mi'kmaq partners who work with us as a university are very excited about this project, as are our partners in the African Nova Scotian community. And we want this building to be literally a concrete manifestation of our commitment to reconciliation and good relations with those two critical founding communities of our province. And more generally, this building will contribute to, as I said, accessibility, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And then finally, we want to work with the municipality to ensure that this project contributes to HRM priorities and development goals. I'm now going to hand things over to Martin.
Simon, how long do I have?
Thank you. There are 4 minutes remaining.
Okay, I'm going to be very fast. Thank you all for having us here. Just to take off from where Bill mentioned, we're in a pre-design phase, and engagement is a huge part of it, and you can see the groups both within King's, Dalhousie, and the wider community, including the Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian community that we've been involved with and continue to be involved with in conversations. I wanted to just spend a couple minutes talking about the zoning context for the project and why, one of the reasons that we're here today. We have had some initial discussions with the planning department and share those ideas with you. So we all know King's location on the corner of the Dalhousie campus at Cobourg and Oxford Street. The campus, as Bill mentioned, built in the 100 years ago through the work of Andrew Cobbin. It's created a really remarkable space in Halifax. The quad is an absolutely extraordinary space, as is much of the architecture of it. And we've been really fortunate to be part of this project. And just speaking personally, my son is a graduate of King, so I've spent many years here and have a deep fondness for it. The work is of a scale and material quality that's really unrivaled. And you can see in this three-dimensional view that we are talking today with you about the gymnasium building, which is proposed to be demolished with the intention to build a new facility in that location. And we have two models to show you of the as of right condition for this site. One is the high-rise model where the height limit is 38 meters and it triggers certain kinds of setbacks as well as street wall definitions. And here in a plan view, you can get a sense of what that means. The footprint of the building in the lighter color allows us to build up to 14 meters high in the current definition of a street wall, though the street wall has two buildings in front of it already. So it's a bit of an anomaly on the site that we think pushes the development in a certain direction that will both diminish the quad, but also have impact on some of the development goals in the area. And so you can see here in a three-dimensional view what the high-rise model as of right triggers. The density is pushed forward into the quad and away from the adjacent streets that are quite underdeveloped. And here from the back, looking from the Dal side. Then there's another model that's also available as of right, which is known as the tall mid-rise building. This allows, again, same street wall conditions, but because of the lower height limit of 26 meters, it does allow for a somewhat wider footprint, but really the setbacks still are deploying the density in an area that, in our opinion, is not helpful both for Kings and for the development of this area in particular. And here you can see the way that bulk gets distributed. It's fairly imposing into the quad. and from the Dalhousie side. So what we'd like to talk to you about is that, 30 seconds. Well, we're going to suggest that an approval process through a development agreement is the appropriate thing to do. And the reason is that we really think that shifting some of that density to the southeast will create an opportunity to reinforce the street edge along Lord Dalhousie and the connection with the library and up to Coburg. It will allow for alignment with the buildings on the south end of the site, the tri-bays and the new academic building, and it will allow us to also deploy the density where a gateway building in connection to Dalhousie is also preferable and desirable from an urban planning point of view and a connection to Dal. And I'm out of time. Thank you very much. That was fast.
Thank you to both of our presenters. We'll now ask councillors to put forward any questions of clarification they may have for our presenters. And I see that Councillor Cuttle would like to intervene.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering how much more of the presentation is left and if it would be possible to extend the presentation by a couple of minutes in order for you to finish. I think it is important that we understand the concept of what's being proposed since you're asking for a variance. Would that be okay, Madam Chair?
I'll ask our advisors to give me guidance on this.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you can exercise a bit of discretion just to provide a couple minutes if you so desired.
Okay. Please proceed with a couple of moments.
Madam Vice Chair, and thank you, Councillor Cuttle. This is the end, but maybe we rushed through a few things. So we were aware of the time. Maybe just looking at this, there is an interest on our part, and I think really it goes beyond King. This is an incredible asset at King's College. It's an architecture that's very specific to its time and place and has created really extraordinarily beautiful buildings and a quad that is remarkable. And our sense is that if we start pushing all the density forward into that, both in terms of built form, just the volume that pushes forward, as well as the shading and the sun impacts of it, it wouldn't be really to King's benefit at all. But there's also city building qualities to what we're suggesting, which is by deploying the density closer to what aren't formally streets. They're actually not official streets. They're on the Dalhousie property, the Lord Castine Way and Lord Dalhousie, but you do get to reinforce those street edges and the buildings there, both on the Dalhousie side of Lord Dalhousie and on the King side with the residence and the library. It's an interesting site because it's a site that doesn't have one front door in a way. There's a presence on the King's campus and the King's Quad, but there's also a presence to the street and to Dalhousie, and we really want to try to take advantage of those because we think it's a win-win for all the players involved. We're not asking in this proposition of collaboration with the city, we're not here looking for greater development or greater density, but rather just some relaxation in the way the setbacks are created and the way the street wall is interpreted, given that this street wall is really 50, 60, 70 meters from Coburg, from the street, and there are two buildings that block it. So technically it may be a required way to look at the site, but in fact it's not really applicable. So the site doesn't play exactly to the intentions of the zoning, though it certainly does, would follow the letter of it to sort of create a street wall. So I think that's what we really wanted to get at. So it's really taking some of this density that you see in that core of the elevated portion of this project and have it come more towards the southeast.
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Cuttle if she would like to speak with questions of clarification.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I guess my question of clarification would be about the implications of shifting the density to the outside the quad. I mean, you spoke a lot about the quad and the King's campus and maintaining some quality to its campus, but I'm not quite sure how the density shifted to the outside is going to contribute to the broader campus. And the maths building is there, and you have the on Dalhousie, and I know there's a bunch of parking lot in behind there, but is there a bigger plan or scheme of how this is going to affect the light and like I think you mentioned a gateway, but that wasn't particularly articulated.
I'd perhaps first start by saying that the footprint of the building still at grade isn't shifting. That part of the density, the main public spaces on the ground and upper 2 floors still effectively land in the same place as the current gymnasium does. And there is still that connection to the quad directly. We're anticipating a more open and transparent and accessible building. But the location on the lower levels is consistent with what's there now and holds that corner of the quad. There is really no impact in shifting the density on shadow or light to Dalhousie because this is on the south side. So all of the sun angles, and they're not part of this just because of the timing, but we've done the sun analysis and it doesn't impact Dalhousie. The impact is onto the King's Quad, and it's this time of year, obviously, that it's most impacted. The density at the back, you can see on this that the buildings on King's really form and define the quad at the upper level, and the bays, for instance, and the library are 2 kind of lines that really hold that edge. Moving the piece further to the southeast will allow that to be reinforced, in our opinion, more strongly. And when I say a gateway building, I do believe that coming down Lord Dalhousie, there's the opportunity to both have an identity for King's, but it is also the main thoroughfare and the crossroads between King's and Dalhousie through the Wallace McCain Learning Commons that's quite active today. So experientially, it makes a lot of sense to do that. There's no impact, in our opinion, or in terms of sun or anything else, with no impact on Dalhousie to do that. And we actually think that moving it there strengthens that connection because we're a bit closer to Dal. And you mentioned the parking. We actually are talking to Dal as well, because our interest is that there are a number of spots there that probably could be removed and create a greater green space and connection to Dalhousie.
Okay, thank you. And I know you're here presenting at CPED. Has an application for the variance been submitted?
No, not at all. We've had initial discussions with the planning department that gave us the interpretations, and that's led us in this early pre-design phase to study the building envelope and the zoning. And so we've had this opportunity to come before you and wanted to just share that information, and our intention is to obviously go back and work with the planning department to discuss these issues explicitly. But there's no building yet, and we're in early days, but this zoning led us to understand that that we think this is the right thing to do on so many grounds.
All right, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other requests to pose questions, so I'll thank our presenters, and we'll move to the next portion of our meeting. The next part of our meeting is the public participation part, and I see we have no registered speakers. Is there anyone in the gallery who would like to speak today? Is there anyone in the gallery who would like to speak today? Is there anyone in the gallery who would like to speak today? Okay, we don't have anyone to speak today, so we'll move on to the next item, which is information items brought forward, and we don't have any, so we're now moving to reports. And I understand that staff will be presenting the park lighting strategy. So I'll ask that they come forward at this time.
All right. Good morning, Vice Chair. Good morning, Committee. My name is Stephen Cushing. I'm a landscape architect in the Policy and Planning Division of Parks and Recreation, and I'm here to present the park lighting strategy this morning for your consideration. So as a quick overview, this project stems from a 2021 Regional Council motion from Councillor Austin, where he asked staff to develop a scoping report for park lighting, specifically how it would be approached and delivered. So we brought back a report in 2022, a scoping report that outlined different scenarios for park lighting that we thought might be appropriate, and also a review of best practices that would help inform a future strategy. So subsequently, this project was added to the 2023-24 Parks and Recreation Business Plan. So the process to include lighting in parks has been quite varied over time, without a consistent and formal approach, and that's despite lighting becoming an expected component of public life for connectivity and accessibility, especially this time of year when daylight is reduced, and a large portion of our year where that daylight is reduced. But because our park system is so vast and it differs quite a bit from community to community, we know that thoughtful and measured approaches are needed to roll out lighting. And that's really the goal of this strategy. Why we're delivering it is to create that formal process that has been lacking, to provide guidance for ourselves, for staff, for council, anyone who's doing work with the municipality, so we can roll out lighting that is safe, or spaces that are consider safety, security, and overall park enjoyment. So in that 2022 scoping report, we identified 3 scenarios that would be good candidates for lighting. The first being pathways in parks that connect community to essential community destinations as a priority. Facilities like sport courts, skate parks, any supporting amenity or structure, gazebos or buildings in parks. Then we have placemaking lighting, which is our public art, fountains, plazas, seating areas, social areas, and any seasonal displays that we may host in parks. And I'll just clarify, we have had some questions whether ball diamonds and sport fields would be included within the strategy. We do see those as out of scope for the strategy because when they're purpose-built, they will have lighting. Select facilities will have lighting integrated into them from the design outset. The playing field strategy already has actions to identify which facilities might have lighting and how to approach that. But this strategy will still be useful in those scenarios, especially how people are getting to those facilities if it is after dark, and guidance for light quality and that kind of thing. So we did host a public engagement program in 2023. And we really wanted to know how people are using parks after dark. We wanted to know if lighting would improve their experience after dark and where lighting may need improvement. We used the Shape Your City platform to engage people online through a survey. We worked through our community developers to direct them our way for a phone call and email, or direct them to the survey. We hosted paper copies of the survey in all branches of the public library system as well. And we had great feedback presenting to our lived experience committees, mainly Accessibility Advisory, Women's Advisory, and Youth Advisory. And then again, we did have some internal workshopping and kind of scoping with our parks colleagues and other business units. and external stakeholders, just to name a few: Ecology Action Centre, Birds Canada, Illuminating Engineering Society, Regional Centre for Education, Build Nova Scotia, business improvement districts in the region as well. It's just to give you an overview. And just to give you a brief, what we heard, almost 60% of all respondents said that they don't use parks after dark for fear of safety and security. 91% of respondents said that they would be more inclined to take a park pathway in particular if it was lit after dark. That winter and shoulder season lighting would improve one's ability to use a park after dark, which isn't that late this time of year, as we know. But despite an interest for lighting, people did express concern that it shouldn't be lighting at any cost. It should be controlled only lighting where we need it to avoid disruption to humans and wildlife and that kind of thing, which kind of led into that ask for efficiency and effectiveness, and wanting us to explore efficient fixtures, solar lighting, and that kind of thing. So based on that public feedback, the research we conducted, the review of best practices, we've put together some simple yet we think fairly effective guidance for how we're going to roll out lighting moving forward. And a defining approach in this strategy is that we're going to consider lighting as a standard capital component in all pathway, facility, and placemaking projects moving forward. Not to say that lighting will be included in every project moving forward. It's just there's an efficiency to be had if we're disturbing a park once. Look to see if it's suitable at the time, rather than go in and disturb later. Section 6 of the attachment has some of those criteria that we would still evaluate in every case. Then we have these spaces that aren't lit that will be evaluated as needed. And that's when requests are made by regional council, as staff bring them forward in annual budgets. If there's overlapping projects, like an integrated project internally, that could be a good time to bring lighting in, or if there's external partnerships and funding. We want to make sure that, skipped one. We want to make sure that lighting is high quality, using it only where we need it at minimum light levels required. The bottom graphic there on your screen kind of shows at a quick kind of glance, moving from left to right, poor quality lighting to higher quality lighting, moving from a typical Cobra headlight or floodlight that isn't controlled or shielded into lighting that is more directed, warmer color temperature, which we know there's lots of research on how that's better for humans and wildlife. Lower intensity if we don't need high intensity, and further shielding and timers and sensors if that's suitable in a particular location. And we do want to make sure that this strategy can evolve and adapt over time. And part of that is evaluating emerging technologies, solar in particular. And in 2024, we were able to pilot 3 different kinds of solar fixtures in parks. So we still have some time to evaluate those and how they're transitioning from season to season, and what the light quality is like, what the battery life is like. But through support with other departments, like in environment and climate change, we're able to roll out further lighting next year, solar lighting. One of the most important steps for determining if lighting is needed at all and to understand a space is a site analysis. So how a space transitions from day to night, what facilities are there, where are the neighbors, are there sensitive environmental features we want to stay away from, are there known areas of antisocial behavior or places that we may need to highlight, or moving into the next one, do a safety assessment to understand space. And so CPTED, it might be one tool that you're familiar with, crime prevention through environmental design. But our community safety office has another tool that builds upon the success of that tool, called the Women's Safety Assessment. And that's really one tool set up to reduce barriers for women, gender diverse, and other underrepresented residents, including them in the planning of space safety, and lighting tends to be recommendations that come out of those assessments, and they're already used in public space, including parks. So that's one evaluation tool, another evaluation tool that we can use, especially for more complex projects. So moving forward, there's still some additional planning and policy work that we'll be undertaking to support park lighting and use of parks after dark. Our parks bylaw, P600, already sets out parks open hours, generally 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. We don't see a universal change required there. Where we may see changes if we're lighting pathways to be open for traveling between communities when a park is closed. What that looks like, whether it's an update of P600 down the road or through the authority by the executive director already. Some municipalities just have an icon on a sign or signage wording just to indicate that a pathway is open. Policy change for better alignment. The municipal design guidelines is one document that comes to mind, where street-to-street walkways are outlined in detail on how they should be built. Lighting in these situations are for a vehicular standard, so the next time that comes up for review, we can better align making those spaces safer for pedestrians. As a companion document, sister document to that, our team is developing a green book standard, so a park standard, which has shown up in previous business plans. And that's really setting construction standards for things like sport courts, benches, garbage cans, that kind of thing. And we'll have a series of lighting standards that will be integrated in to make it easier for staff and developers and contractors. And lastly, capital planning, because there are such demands every year on the Parks and Rec budget, and because lighting infrastructure can be expensive, we would be working with our capital colleagues to bring projects forward on an annual basis based on that budget and capacity. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cushing. I'll turn to Patty Cattell, who's first on the list.
Thank you very much. Would you like me to put the motion on the floor to start? Yeah. Okay. 1 second. I move that the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council adopt the park lighting strategy as set out in Attachment A of the staff report dated August 28th, 2024, as a guiding document for the planning of pathway, facility, and placemaking lighting, and direct the Chief Administrative Officer to incorporate the identification and prioritization of the lighting of such features into future budgets and business plans. So I was really thrilled to see this come up on the agenda. I think it's there's a lot of pathways. We probably have them in each of our districts. Parks that are dark, concerns about safety, and oh no, my computer's shutting down with my notes on it. Okay, I'm gonna have to just wing it now. Concerns, just concerns around safety. Many of the things that you mentioned in your report. One of the things I was surprised that wasn't more prominent was the importance of this strategy to active transit. Many of our connecting trails to communities run through parks and trails, and we talked about in your report, like I believe it was like human health, accessibility, and equity. Placemaking, I think. Bring this up now, and human enjoyment. But there wasn't a strong emphasis, or in my opinion, I didn't feel there was a strong enough emphasis on how this integrates with our active transportation strategies. And what I run into with pathways is that sometimes I'll have a bit of a pathway that belongs to parks, and maybe it gets considered under this strategy, that then connects to a public works right away, which I don't know how that then connects to the park. So in terms of snow clearing, they're two totally different things. In terms of vegetation maintenance, two totally different things. In terms of accessibility, two totally different things that aren't integrated. And so I think that having a look at that is really important, and also having a look in terms of prioritizing parks to be on the list for park lighting is to also understand not just the active transportation opportunities, but also the key connections to transit. because these pathways are often the most direct connection between a street in a neighborhood and a transit corridor. And so how are we using this strategy also to support our strategies around increasing ridership to transit? Or also looking at how trails connect to key destinations in communities to help advance the concept of, complete communities and walkable communities. So those are some of the things that I was hoping to see more of in the strategy, and I know you did touch on them on a high level, but because they weren't pulled out as a specific kind of element, it does leave me a little concerned. Also, I know in Spryfield I have a regional, to get specific to my district, I have a regional park, the McIntosh Run Community Trail, which has several branches to different streets. It's used by school kids, it's used by commuters, it's used by dog walkers for recreation. I mean, these are heavily used pathways and trails, and I don't see it in here, and I don't know if it got missed or because the map that's shown there doesn't really show Spryfield at all, and I'd be interested in specifically knowing what's on the table for that area. I have some of the highest transit use in the city in terms of ridership. A lot of new communities that need these connections, and also a highly equity deserving community where people don't just use transit as a choice, but as a necessity, and trying to help make that safer and facilitate that would be critically important. Thank you.
Councillor Kent. Or you're going to respond to first. Okay, perfect, great.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'll just start with your last point, the McIntosh Run Trail. You'll see in the appendix of the strategy, the proper, that there are some pathways and things that we did call out. That was really because we have 200 kilometers of pathways. We really could only get to that 2D desktop assessment. So we looked at those paths that we knew were already potentially accessible standard, that were having those connections from community to school to transit to retail to whatever. That isn't a be-all end-all list. We know that there's going to be situations like this one where we're going to have to reevaluate. If we missed one, there's going to be some on there that perhaps we won't even do and won't get to, because we'll have to get there on site and realize that this can't be brought to an accessible standard to attract people to it and to light it. So that's one that I can look at and get back to you on that one. In the criteria in section 6, one of the lenses that we want to make sure we're looking at is an equitable lens, because we know that there are some people that disproportionately rely on foot or transit to get where they need to go. And so when we're evaluating what we're going to do this year, that equitable lens, we want that to be placed on that review each year. Active transportation, we did work with our AT folks in the development of this strategy, because just under a third of the pathways we have in parks are labeled AT in our inventory. So they worked with us in getting some of this data together. They want to work with us as we're rolling out lighting, because there's definitely cost sharing abilities on where lighting may go. It'll influence how that's designed for people moving through parks, and we want it to be safe, especially if there's bikes and scooters and things moving faster than people walking, and so that may change the kind of lighting that we may roll out. So active transportation is within scope, because it is a dominant part of pathways and parks.
Councillor Kent.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to follow up a little bit on Councillor Cuddle's points. I kind of just want to ditto. There was a lot of really, really important features. I'm new to CPED, so what department are you in?
Parks and Recreation.
Parks and Recreation. Okay, so we have a public safety component, we have Parks and Recreation component, we have active transportation, we have public works, we have streets and roads, we have so many intersecting departments. First of all, I guess I should back up and say I love that this is here. I'm really glad it's here. It's overdue. A lot of calls come into councillors for lighting. And where I'm going with the intersecting is the piece around priorities and the piece around who does what, when, and how, and who puts the request in for budget. And you're the lead at Parks and the strategy. How hands-on are you? You're the knowledge maker of this, and of course I know you have accountability upwards, but this is where I feel like even a lot of our strategies, when the rubber meets the road, the rubber goes gooey, and it's difficult. And it's particularly difficult for district spaces that have maybe less traffic, less people using them, not because they're not important, but because they're just a smaller community space. And nonetheless, that lighting is equally important to their safety and their active use of the parks and trails and the pathways. Pathways are one of the most difficult things to deal with in the municipality as far as a councillor, in my opinion, because those pathways have been historically placed by many, many different governments, in particular pre-amalgamation, and the growth that has happened around them doesn't necessarily meet the need, is over, I guess, straining the infrastructure of some of them, and some of them just don't make sense anymore. So I don't think you can specifically answer who does what, when, and where, and how, but I can tell you that I feel like a strategic space within a report like this has to be about interoperability within the municipal structure that will do the job. I was really glad to see that. I think it's a no-brainer that every pathway that is new or park space or any of that has to be considered for lighting, and I think we've, I'm not concerned about that as much. I'm concerned about what do we do with everything that's in place now. So there's that. And light pollution. Light pollution is real. It's I'm less concerned about this within the parks and the municipal approach to this, but it is real, and many of us get a lot of calls on them. I think I've covered off everything. I'm just going to use my last 1 minute to suggest, I suspect this particular attachment D was done before the boundaries changed. The lists are a little off, but for now I think that's okay, that's workable, but before this is endorsed fully or put in front of everyone, we should get that resolved. So I'll just leave it there. I see Richard's come down, and Richard's knowledgeable, so maybe he's going to offer some insight on the intersection part.
So thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Richard Harvey. I'm the Manager of Policy and Planning. I'm not going to be more knowledgeable than Stephen Cushing on this matter, but I thought I'd be able to just provide a little bit of business planning context to the question. So the challenge that we have in many ways is that we're not a brand new municipality. We're not starting from scratch in many ways. So many of the things that we've identified are existing pathways, which of course are challenging from a business planning perspective. What this strategy does is it gives us the parameters as we're both thinking about new pathways and we're thinking about new sports courts or even placemaking, what it is that we should do so that we don't end up with a lot of pathways that aren't improperly lit. So it's an important consideration that even for sport courts, as an example, given the fact that, and it's a good example that we're now in a shoulder season, how do we extend the playing in many of that? And where it can be done sensibly, that's what we would do. Same thing with new pathways. We have that lens, and we also have the means then through this by which we might most appropriately consider lighting, so that we're not, for example, we're hooding lighting in the right way, we're lighting it with the right, lumens and other things, to do it properly. So all that to say, what do we do with our existing situation? Well, this also provides us with some guidance about how it is that we might prioritize that, how it is that we go about it. But of course, that's the challenge that we're up against in every budget cycle. So what you could expect is that as we are going through and you're starting, we are consulting with you on our parks capital budget, and that would be the same for AT as well, as we're looking at any new pathways within parks. We will be coming to you and saying, we can't do it all, but here are what the biggest priorities are, and we'll be expecting you as well to come to us, as you've always done, to identify those priorities so that we can start to outline them within our capital budget planning.
Councillor Saint-Amand. And then I'll do an intervention, and then you, Patty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think what Councillor Kent raised is an important element of how a strategy like this can be fully realized. The intersection between a variety of different priorities that we have as a municipality can be addressed and touched upon with a judicious rollout of a plan like this. When we have elements of public safety and of crime prevention, we have the potential for vandalism in parks that are unlit. There's a variety of different things that we can address simultaneously, and also similarly effect change with the accessibility of transit, active transport. There's a variety of different elements that we can all pull under the umbrella of being able to provide safe and efficient lighting that winds up guiding people in the use of municipal assets like parks, pathways, and so forth. I'm curious about where some of the potential advantages may lie with the rollout of a plan like this. I mean, I would expect that we would not only look at this through the lens of new infrastructure builds so that we have a plan going forward, but also looking at the opportunities or the potential therein for retrofits of existing facilities that we know are immediately adjacent to active transport lanes and our transit stations and a variety of different areas where we can improve lighting and provide better service along the corridors that we already have in order to maybe encourage use a little bit more. If there are bus stops that are in spots that are not especially well lit, then we address that with a lighting strategy, and suddenly we have people coming back to using transit again. And maybe that provides better service in the shoulder seasons when someone might otherwise start switching back to their car because their particular corridor is less lit than other corridors, and so they wind up in the seasons that are a little bit darker, switching back to a personal vehicle rather than taking transit. There's lots of potential different opportunities here. I know that the smart light infrastructure tends to cost a little bit more, but it's also the sort of thing that winds up with a reduced cost over time, both for operation and for maintenance. So hopefully those things ultimately can offset one another, particularly when we start modifying or benefiting from some of the less directly attributable items like vandalism and crime and the better services that we're able to deliver to residents. I'm wondering about whether or not the retrofitting of existing parks and pathways may also offer a certain budgetary advantage too, because we're talking about potentially just a different approach to what's at the top of a pole, and the pole and the infrastructure and the electrical connections are already there. Are improvements with our existing infrastructure another way that we can improve services without absorbing the budget of completely new installs? Because 80 or 90% of the infrastructure is already there, and we're simply going to top up the service that we're providing by making a particularly careful selection of where we wind up deploying new assets like smart lights, like lights with covers that direct the light down, selection of lights at certain temperatures, color, or light wave lengths, those sorts of things in order to provide better visibility and achieve some of those public safety objectives that we're looking to achieve in the process. Can you speak to whether or not some thought has been given to how, I realize some of that is difficult to nail down in terms of cost, because there are some elements of that that are really difficult to define and trace down to their ultimate goal. But have you looked at the possibility of retrofits of existing areas, particularly when you look at that 30,000-foot view, to have that intersection to other areas of priority for council?
Through you, Vice Chair. We have looked at retrofits, and some of that's already happening. Our operations team has been kind of retrofitting from old incandescent to LEDs, that kind of thing. It's really going to depend on the fixtures we have out there and the poles we have out there. We're trying to move away from tall road height poles into more pedestrian poles, although the wooden poles are easier to retrofit than more of the proprietary, specific brand kind of poles that aren't always as easy to swap out.
Right.
But I mean, if there's a savings to be had, and if we could do that uniformly, an issue with some of our older lighting is that it wouldn't necessarily meet the strategy anymore. So retrofitting one light may not be an advantage, but we definitely want to look at efficiencies like that.
Right, and recognizing you have an awful lot of poles to worry about across all of HRM.
That's right, and it's very inconsistently applied throughout the municipality. So it may work in one area, that kind of retrofit. It may not work in another.
I know one of the elements that has been piloted, at least on the Bedford waterfront, was some solar options as well. Has that pilot come to its conclusion? Have you been able to draw any conclusions about whether or not those types of fixtures can be successful rolling out, because it doesn't require the same infrastructure necessarily, even if the individual units are a little bit more expensive to power themselves?
Through you, Vice Chair. It's a good point, and that's where we are piloting a bollard and a taller pedestrian standard. And it appears to be working out quite well. The light quality, the light spread is better than anticipated. We didn't really know, traditionally solar hasn't been as powerful or as useful. So that is working out well enough that we're able to potentially roll out more solar lighting in that park.
And one final question: Do the solar cells that are in?
Oh, sorry,
units?
Councillor Saint-Amand, you're out of time. Sorry about that. Also, I'd like to beg the indulgence of the councillors to make some of my initial comments before we move to the second round, if that's okay with everyone. And I'll stay here in the chair, as I understand this is a little less formal than council. So I just want to echo a few of the comments that were made earlier by other councillors. Like Councillor Kent, I was super excited to see the park lighting strategy, and as a daily trail user, that would give me a lot more options for when I can go for my run on trails. So that's fantastic. I do want to just emphasize the importance of active transportation, and particularly related to school access. It's a really big priority to have walkable schools, and often there are school activities that take place after dark, particularly in the season. So I think we really want to encourage that, rather than seeing all the cars sitting and idling and waiting for the students and all the street overcrowding around schools. So want to emphasize that. The other thing that didn't really jump out at me in the strategy is how we would handle the public consultation. While I'd be excited about having lights on the trail next to me, I don't live right on the trail. And I do know that some people would not be as excited to have lights, depending on the quality of the lights, depending on the timing, and depending on who having the lights on the trail attracted. There may be more potential crime, even though the light should reduce some crime in the dark. It may also draw more people, more noise, more nuisance. So the public consultation component of this would be important. I know you've done some initial consultation, so would like to hear a few comments on that. Thank you.
Through you to you, Vice Chair. I just want to stress that AT pathways are included within the strategy. There is an official AT classification that's not always our standard, 3 to 4 meter wide asphalt. There are other paths that we might, consider AT. Those connections to school from home are one of those important connections that we also agree with you that if they can be lit, that we could consider them for lighting. We often have this line between what is HRM, what is provincial TIR, and that changes depending on, what school it is and how old the school is. But when speaking with the Center for Education, they encourage us to bring, any proposals for lighting that may kind of cross that line or bring, more lighting towards schools that we can. There is a strategic, what is it called? Strategic or a steering committee that HRM and HRCE and TIR all sit on, and that those projects will be brought forward at that time for consideration.
On the public consultation part, Richard. Okay, great.
So just on the individual application of lights, there's always an assessment that needs to happen, and inherent within the strategy, there are good guidelines about how it is that lighting is not to be cast upon private property and otherwise. So that's always a consideration. If there was ever to be a situation where the lights were a detriment from a just a public use perspective, if there was to be something happening in evenings and otherwise, we would always assess those on an individual basis. So that's how we would generally go about that from a very practical perspective in terms of implementing them on any particular section of trails or pathways.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So my one concern here is about the focus on new parks and new trails and implementing this on a go-forward basis. This strategy is here before us because a lot of concerns were coming from existing communities about the need for lighting on pathways and in parks. And so, I have difficulty not seeing that being more of an emphasis. I do realize the challenges that when those parks and places, were built, that the infrastructure to accommodate lighting wasn't included in the design. But I also strongly feel that there are communities who have been asking and waiting for lighting on their pathways and their playgrounds, on their sports courts for a long time, and to see them kind of, passed over for a real focus on new things going forward, I think is problematic because it means that the existing issues aren't going to be addressed as I think many of us were hoping for, because we've recognized that there are issues and we're looking for solutions. So I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit more about that and how we can strike the right balance between, the policy around new pathways and trails and facilities and amenities and sports courts, and addressing the priority areas that currently exist and need to have a lighting solution.
So, Vice Chair, I may have overstated what I was meaning to state in terms of an earlier just comment was what the strategy allows us to do is, as we are implementing new things that we now know would have been problematic, we don't just simply implement them and then do the lighting afterwards, for example. So if we know that we have a new trail that's going in anyways, we know that should have lighting with it, we do that now. That's not to diminish the assessment that needs to be taken over existing situations. It's not at all to do that. In fact, I think there should be a strong concentration on the problem areas to make sure that those are emphasized.
Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Councillor Kent.
Yes, thank you. So I want to iterate that how pleased I am to see something come forward as similar to other statements. It's an issue, and I'm really pleased, Stephen, that you've put the energy that you have into it. I didn't realize I hadn't connect. I don't know if we've actually seen each other where I would have connected Stephen Cushing to you. So I know, just a funny thing. When would this be coming to council, do you think?
So, Vice Chair, the committee would make a recommendation. It would go to council in due course. It would probably be something in the new year, given the schedule. So early in the new year, it would go to regional council. Regional council then would look at your recommendation and make a decision about its adoption.
Thank you.
Councillor Saint-Amand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask a nerdy question about how long those power cells last, but the Chair's comments actually sparked a different idea in me. The notion of active transportation, I mean, one of the things that I've particularly noted in my experience in fitness and health is that habit forming is incredibly important, and active transportation is a habit forming thing. And so, when it comes to approaches to schools and school parks, this lighting strategy could be an absolutely vital game changer in instilling those habits in our youngest generation early, and therefore have a generational impact. Because if we establish that active transport habit early enough, then it's more likely to last much later into that person's life. Particularly when it's well supported by a strategy that's subsequently been implemented by the municipality. And so we not only have this strategy being applied through that lens to existing infrastructure, but also adjusting our approach to new investments that are made in the future. So, I see this as a vital opportunity for us to be able to use this strategy, apply this strategy, and use its lens to affect change, not just going forward, but in particular looking at strategies to be able to really reinforce that active transportation that we want to make such a vital part of HRM going forward. So if there's one thing that I think we really need to focus on here is the opportunity to roll out this strategy across all assets that we have, and just be very careful so that obviously we have to balance that with our budgetary needs. But the more we can roll this thinking out across the existing assets in our inventory, the better service we can provide to our residents. Thank you.
Do we have any additional questions for speakers? Okay, thank you very much to Mr. Cushing and Mr. Harvey for responding to the questions. I think we're now ready to move to the question, are we? Okay, let's commence voting. Oh. All in favor? There's no contrary-minded. So, okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So I've been advised that we have a bit of a time crunch, and it's very important to address the motion related to appointment to executive committee. So I'm asking that someone put forward a motion to move this item to the next item on the agenda. Okay. Moved by Councillor Saint-Amand and seconded by Councillor Purdy. Okay. So the next motion, okay. And could I have Councillor Saint-Denis read the motion, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. That the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee appoint one councillor from the members of the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee to serve on the Executive Standing Committee for a term to November 2026.
And we have Councillor Catella as the seconder. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I can speak to the process for this a little bit. This would be similar to our chair election. We would just open the floor for nominations to the position. If there are multiple nominations, we'll have an election by way of secret ballot. And if there is only one, that person will be acclaimed. Following the close of the nomination period, that is considered to change the motion that's on the floor, so we would just call the question on it.
Okay. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to nominate Councillor Cuttle.
Can I just confirm, Councillor Kent, did you second that one, or? I can, yeah. Sure, thanks.
Councillor Cuttle, do you accept the nomination?
I accept the nomination. Thank you.
Okay, so we can move to a vote. Go ahead, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. I would also like to nominate Councillor Kent.
Okay. Okay. Do we? Okay. So, okay, and we have a seconder, which is Councillor Saint-Denis. Okay, I'll pass this to the legislative assistant.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if we can just confirm that these are our nominees and that nobody would like to withdraw their nomination, that both do desire to run for the position. First of all, I'll just call to see if there's any further nominations. Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? Thank you. If those are our confirmed nominees, I'll go ahead and begin to circulate ballots. With the chair's discretion, we can offer some just a moment just to speak to what interests you.
Okay, I'll call on Councillor Cuttle to speak to the group to address her interest in the position.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So, yeah, I'm very keen to sit on executive. I feel that over the past 4 years, I've sat on many committees. I have a good understanding of what is happening across multiple committees, whether it's been on the Halifax Water Commission, chair of CPED, Transportation Standing Committee. I also am chair of the Halifax West Community Council, and I'm the Halifax representative on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And I believe that, you know, bringing together that perspective, that knowledge, connecting those dots is something that I can bring to the table with the Executive Standing Committee. And I did serve 1 year on Executive Standing Committee in the last term, and I'm hoping to be able to continue that with, with the transition that we're having amongst all the councillors and the mayor. I feel that that continuity would be valuable, and I hope I can count on your support for continuing in that role. Thank you.
Councillor Kent, I'll call on you to put your pitch forward.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm very interested as well in the executive committee. I've had the pleasure of serving on a number of committee and boards throughout my career, both in the provincial realm and here at the municipality and in the community. More recently, I have been on the Board of Police Commission as the chair for 2 years, ushered in a number of strengthening changes to that board, and I was the committee chair for the search committee for hiring of our new chief. While at the municipalities in both terms, I have had experience on grants, appeals, Halifax Water as the chair, Transportation Standing Committee, Active Transportation Advisory Committee, Women's Committee. I'm the current chair of Harbour East Community Council and Canadian Federation of Municipalities as well. Those are the ones that I can remember. And I've never done the executive committee. And I do believe as well that right now with, again, ushering in change and supporting our new mayor, and that my background and experiences would lend well to the executive governance of the municipality, and I'd be able to contribute significantly, I believe, to that team. So I too am looking for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just give a moment for members of standing committee to complete their ballots, and then I'll go around and collect them. Thank you, Chair. Through you to the standing committee, I can confirm that Councillor Cuddle was the successful election winner and nominee. We can now proceed at standing committee's discretion to call the question.
So we'll call for the question. I don't know what to say. Okay. So, show of hands. All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll move to the next item of business. Sorry about that. Now we'll move to the next item of business, which is 13.1.2, addressing Castle Hill pickleball court noise. And I understand we have two staff members that will be presenting today, Mark Innes and Jacqueline Belil. So I'll invite them to come up, please. Oh.
Good morning. Through the chair to the members of the committee, my name is Mark Innes. I'm a community planner with the Policy and Planning team in Parks and Recreation. Today I want to present to you the item on the agenda that addresses the Castle Hill pickleball noise matter. Castle Hill Parks, located at 22 Castle Hill Drive in the Rockingham area of Halifax. It was established in 1996 through the subdivision process for the neighborhood that surrounds it. It was deeded as park dedication at that time. It's predominantly a residential setting. Essentially, the park's in the middle of a residential block that's surrounded by 3 multi-unit dwellings. One's very close to not only the property line of the park, but also the pickleball courts that are contained within it, about 8 to 10 meters, as well as 12 single-family homes that have backyards that abut the park. With the emergence of pickleball, in 2019, HRM undertook a bit of an opportunity or a program to convert various tennis courts, select tennis courts, to pickleball courts. 2 of those were contained within Castle Hill Park. By 2023, the courts became very busy over the emergence of the sport and the years continuing up to that point. And it led to local residents lodging complaints for a couple of reasons. Most importantly, or the 2 most prominent, were the frequency of play. There was examples where there's 4 courts in play at one time, and that would continue sometimes throughout full weekend days and evenings. So frequency of play was one, and also the more common matter of the paddle ball impact, which affects pickleball play in general. It's the hard surface paddle and the plastic ball making a sharp popping sound upon each impact. The complaints continued throughout that summer and into the early fall, which led council to ask staff to address, make a motion for ask staff to address the noise issues. Mitigation measures were attempted by staff throughout the summers of 2023 and 2024. In 2023, hours of operation were established very specific to the courts themselves from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., which differs from the park hours of operation. With that initiative in 2023, there were still some complaints coming in of early play, despite the posted hours. In 2024, the additional measure of locking the court gates in line with those hours of operation was undertook, as well as a second attack of deploying foam pickleballs. Now, foam pickleballs are generally, from best practice, a sound mitigating type of ball. They're sound absorbent, they're soft materials, and they don't necessarily have that same impact noise as the plastic balls do. Despite those efforts, complaints continued throughout the summer of 2024. We've had complaints of both, keep in mind that we had signage to use to deploy the foam pickleballs, as the image shows on the screen, but there were still complaints coming in that pickleball players were preferring to use the plastic balls. And some pickleball players also made complaints that they did not enjoy using the foam pickleballs or being kind of ordered to do so. This was all very difficult to enforce, both 2023 and 2024. There were periodic staff site visits to help educate players, as well as there was a few instances where staff were called out to try to deal with a very specific matter on a certain day, but ongoing enforcement proved to be very difficult without having somebody there on a full-time basis. Pickleball noise itself is an increasing issue across North America. Generally in the residential park setting where residences are very close to the courts is where you see the issues. The sharp popping sound, as you mentioned, about the hard surface paddle and the plastic ball are the most prominent complaint, but also around the socialization of the sport. There's often folks who will rotate into games that are maybe watching the play, and there could be multiple courts in play at once, such as in Castle Hill. So that's something that comes up as well as a potential noisemaker. Jurisdictions are starting to deal with these noise issues through various sound mitigating measures. There's 3 key methods of doing so. One's through sound screening. It gets attached to the court fence. Another is through modifying equipment such as foam pickleballs or softer paddles or surfaces, as well as the most effective is appropriate setback distance from the residents to the courts themselves when they are put in place. Through our jurisdictional research on the matter, we came across a case study very similar to the situation in Castle Hill from the city of Vancouver. In 2018, similarly to HRM in 2019, Vancouver converted multiple tennis courts to pickleball courts. Through increase in play, lawsuits were lodged against the city of Vancouver in 2021 and 2022 due to excessive noise issues. Those were very 2 specific courts that the lawsuits were lodged against the city upon, and they were settings again where there were nearby residences very close to the courts themselves. Vancouver's solution was to shut those 2 courts down at the time, but they also went the extra step of hiring a firm to complete a study on pickleball noise. Results of that study have led the city to apply appropriate setback standards and court centralization as two methods of dealing with court placement to ensure that the sound is appropriate to the residential environment on a go-forward basis. This is an example on the screen of both the setbacks they've put in place as well as the court centralization. So the table on the left side of that table, that looks at the number of courts in play, and it takes into account across the top two situations where you have noise mitigation or you don't, and also if the court is a hard or a soft surface. And you look at the table like a matrix, and you can see the appropriate setback you'd apply in meters for proper sound mitigation. On the right is an image of the city of Vancouver, and they've centralized their pickleball courts in 3 locations. Strategically, they're equally distributed amongst the city, as well as they contain multiple pickleball courts at each site, and the largest is in the center at Queen Elizabeth Park with 14 pickleball courts. So the recommendation going forward for Castle Hill Park for 2025 would be to convert the pickleball courts back to 1 tennis court and 1 multi-purpose court. Rationale in doing so would be the courts are located too close to nearby residences. We have about 8 to 10 meters to 1 multi-unit that is essentially right on top of the courts. There's also the multi-unit is essentially a 4-story building, and it actually creates a bit of an amphitheater effect to the noise that emanates from the court. On top of that, the attempted noise mitigation measures in 2023 and 2024 proved to not totally resolve the noise issues. For Mainland Common, recommendation would be to potentially look at a centralized pickleball facility at the Mainland Common. The facility would potentially look something like 6 to 8 courts with possibly room to expand in the future. There's parking available nearby. With the go-ahead, there would be funding potentially for the design to be included in the 2025-2026 capital budget, and construction anticipated for the following season. The Mainland Common had a strategic plan developed in 1992 with an update in 2008. The 2008 update essentially looked at some of the future use of the common, as well as what would be considered passive land versus active land. In looking at the screen, there's a couple options that we've presented as possible locations that could host such a facility for pickleball in option A or B. These are outside the passive areas of land and in the active, for one. 2, they also meet the setback guideline standards that we've seen established in the staff report. With those sites, there were others that were considered. There was various sites in the central and lower portions of the common that we looked at, but with the addition of the pallet shelter community, they wouldn't meet the setback standards, so we've ruled those out and looking more at the upper portion. In conclusion, in following the recommendations in the staff report, the pickleball noise issues at Castle Hill Park would be resolved. A centralized multi-court pickleball facility at the Mainland Common would provide for needed pickleball courts. We do have demand for pickleball. And the best practice setback distance guidelines for locating new pickleball courts we would use on a go-forward basis for future course placement. And that would conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis. I see that Councillor Morse has questions, but she's not in the room, so I'll call on Councillor Cattell. Oh, actually, I'll call on Councillor Cattell to put the motion on the floor, please.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to 1. Remove the pickleball court markings and nets from the courts at Castle Hill Park, and 2. Include funding within the proposed 25-26 capital budget for the design of pickleball courts within Mainland Common as outlined within the staff report dated September 20th, 2024.
Do we have, thank you, Councillor Purdy.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just here to speak a little bit on behalf of Councillor Morse, who had to leave. She had a previous engagement and she couldn't stay, but she was here today at CPED because this is a particularly important report for her community. It has been an ongoing issue, and We've been talking about pickleball courts at Castle Hill for a couple of years now. So she's very happy to see this report come forward and to see this motion on the floor. She notes that it's a very unusual situation with courts so extremely close to private residences, and that there is a need to revert them back to tennis courts and find a new location within an appropriate setback to reduce noise as outlined in the Vancouver policy. She asked that we support the staff recommendation. And also just a question about when this will go to council. She wasn't quite clear about what she said there, but I think there was some concern that there might be a delay in going to council, and she just felt that this needed to, if it needs to go to council, that it goes to council as soon as possible. If I got that part right.
Sorry, through the chair to the councillor. My understanding, it would be going as soon as possible. I don't know of any delay unless anybody else has heard anything, but as far as I know, it's going as normal protocol.
Okay. Fantastic. I do know the popularity of pickleball has exploded. It was one of those COVID things that I think, we can't. I heard of pickleball before COVID, and then COVID happened. It felt like everybody was playing pickleball all of a sudden, all across the municipalities. I even had people in my district out there shoveling courts in the winter and the snowstorms to play pickleball. And having their own nets. So it's good to see that there are pickleball courts going in the mainland common, but and that will service one part of the city well. I'm wondering if there's a larger pickleball court strategy, and if you could speak to that, please.
Through the chair to the councillor, there's not a larger pickleball strategy per se that's specific, but there's potential for future opportunities for court centralization in the future. Kind of modeling a bit off of what Vancouver's kind of presented there, it'd be something that appears to be effective for, first of all, multiple courts, and I know we've heard from some of the pickleball community that it's handy for hosting tournaments and things of this nature, and of course that could be something that could be looked at in the future. This right now is just for the mainland common, or as a potential location, I should say, but it could be further across HRM in the future.
Thank you. I do know that there is a park plan proposed for Graves Oakley Regional Park in Spryfield, and that there has been an expression of interest from pickleballers there to see some multiple pickleball courts put in place. And I just want to, make that plug and hope that that's a consideration in that process. Thank you.
Councillor Saint-Amand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of quick questions. Was sound baffling not an option for this location? I've seen a variety of different utilizations, whether it's some kind of netting that goes up on the outside of the fencing that's around. The sound mitigation strategy that you outlined that had been attempted at that court didn't include sound baffling, so I'm just curious why that is.
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, that was considered. The issue at this site is essentially the multi-unit that's about 8 to 10 meters from the court lies entirely above the court, and sound mitigation is only effective at the ground level. So the sound will still emanate above the sounds of it, and it gets attached to the screening, or the fencing of the court itself. So it's essentially the building that's very close is just above the court and be above the sound mitigation.
And is there a distance at which sound baffling is effective, even when there's a multi-unit building within the vicinity of a pickleball court?
Yeah, in terms of distance, that I don't really have an answer to that. In terms of distance, the setback of the court itself is generally the more effective measure in terms of ensuring the sound is suitable to the residential environment. In this case, again, where it's essentially a 4-story building that sits above the court, even at the ground level, the sound baffling would just the sound would emanate above it. So I don't really have an answer for the distance per se, but
But that would have to do with the angle of attack, wouldn't it?
It would, but this is well above that for sure.
Yeah. But the further back the building, the less extreme that angle would be.
Yeah, that's possible, but in this case, it was not the case.
One of the things that comes to mind is that, you know, we're talking about a hypothetical in that if we were to build a new pickleball court, and that's a big if because that has to fall within the budget, then ultimately we'd be talking about a net loss of 4 pickleball courts for however long it takes us to build new ones. So given the high demand for pickleball, are we doing a disservice to the people that are relying upon this public infrastructure to play pickleball by losing that number of courts for at least, you know, into 2026, 2027 or beyond if the 2025 budget can't support the build of a new one?
Through the chair to the councillor, there will be definitely 4 less courts, no question, for the upcoming season.
Some users from this particular court reached out to me proposing an alternative, and you know, I reached out to staff, and I'm just curious what your reaction is to their suggestion of flipping between. There is another tennis facility just a few blocks from there, so still kind of within the same community, at the Armstrong tennis courts. And those are more like 45 meters away from the nearest building, with trees on 3 sides, and the only direct line of sight to residents is that another 4 or 5 story building. Can you speak to whether or not that, while it doesn't meet the Vancouver level of setback that we're using as our standard here, how might that influence such a potential swap?
Through the chair to the councillor, Armstrong Court was investigated initially as a potential site just around the corner, essentially, from this location. Using the guidelines for 4 courts, it is too close. We'd like to make sure we're on a go-forward basis, don't create new issues. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it is away from, you're right, about 45 meters from the multi. However, it's still for 4 courts to flip down there. It didn't quite meet the sound setback standards for that. So.
But are those setback standards only reasonably applied to new builds as opposed to conversion of existing infrastructure? Or
it should be applied. Sorry, Councillor.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it should be applied to new placement of pickleball courts.
Okay. Yeah. One other question that would pertain to the budgetary impact here: what is, even absent a setback, what would be the cost of thoroughly baffling sound baffling for a court such that the sound objectives could be met as compared to the cost of building entirely new courts?
For that question, we do have the superintendent of parks here with us for that. He might have better information on the cost for those than I do, so
sure.
I'll defer to him.
Thanks.
Adam Cornick.
Hello, Adam Cornick, Superintendent of Parks West, from the chair to the councillor. So we did do some costing for that, and it'll cost about $30,000 to do some sound baffling for Castle Hill in particular. So.
And do we know what the cost of building 4 brand new courts in the mainland common would be? Knowing that we have to come with a dollar figure for the budget anyway?
I don't think we have that exact cost estimate here for that, so I'm not aware, but yeah, I'm not aware.
I know there were tennis courts down the street from me that were spun up very recently, and the price tag I heard was $500,000. Thank you.
Councillor Kent.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I am struggling with why we are considering this in this realm. We're cherry picking one court in one community in one district. We're being asked to vote on whether or not there's removal or remaining a sport type facility, right? A sport facility or activity in that park. And then we're being asked to vote to direct the park funding for a mainland common and insert it into the budget process, of which we will have many opportunities in the future for that councillor to bring forward something for that district. This is very district centered. And don't get me wrong, I like supporting our councillors' initiatives when they feel it's in their best interest for their district and for their community. And pickleball is problematic in way of sound. It's in all of our districts, at least a number of them, and I have had worked hard with our park supervisors and community agents and leaders to come to a resolution around some of these things. But I never once thought that it would be some form of a venue here in this committee to consider a very specific and not a regional in any way until you start putting things like funding the mainland common to have another investment instead of a community investment, which we are all looking for specifically throughout our budget debate. And there are many opportunities, I'll say it again, for any councillor to come forward with this type of ask instead of having resources within our department like you folks to spend all this time. So I guess my question is, where did this start? Did it start here, and why? And do you realize, though, that doing this here creates another, and I wonder, has the work been done at the local level? How many others really now should be coming here? Which I don't believe this committee would have been mandated to do. I'm finding the whole thing frankly a waste of this resources of staff at this point, and waste of a committee time, not because the issue isn't real. I do understand that. If it would have been more appropriate, in my opinion, to have come forward with some form of a recommendation of an amendment to a strategy or something of that nature. But I'm uncomfortable voting on something for that particular councillor's district here in this avenue to say recommend to council. I can't support this. I can't support this on so many levels. And again, not because I don't feel compassion for the community that's being served and feeling the negative effects of this. I get it. I have communities in my district that have the same. But I need to know why this is here. And I can't vote for it. I can't, because we've got a process coming forward for budget that this mainland common tennis courts, I don't know. I've not seen the capital lists yet to see if there's anything being already coming forward in that regard, or is there something to attach it to for cost savings? There's just so many questions in relation to it for me. I can't support it, but if there are any answers to some of the few I threw out, feel free.
Yeah. So to the vice chair, the simple answer is that this was a council motion to get us to this point. So it was to look at the issues that were at Castle Hill. So that's just the simple answer. It's not. So the council, so regional council asks this question of staff. So this is that's correct. Yeah. So that's just the simple answer. The value-added answer is that upon investigation of the situation at Castle Hill, it was found to be an extreme problem in terms of its proximity. Unlike, not to say that there aren't others within the setback distances that Mark's highlighted, but this was found to be an extreme case in many ways. So what we've done is we've tried to work various different measures that would have been highlighted to see if there could be some mitigation. And what we found is that that's not working terribly well for the surrounding residents. and it's not working very well for the pickleball players who actually want to play proper pickleball. So the solution that has been derived is one in which, unfortunately, we're looking at closing the courts at Castle Hill, which are very well used. So on that basis, we have thought, well, we should be providing an alternative. It's not one that we can deliver right away, but through our investigations, what we're realizing is that the best alternatives are these centralized courts. And that applies in this particular situation, in this catchment area. I think it goes without saying, it's one of those things that we will also be looking at likely throughout the municipality. So although we're very much looking at this particular situation and what the solution would be, it's also lesson learned for other courts that we would have in the municipality. And I would suspect that you're likely going to see other initiatives from us to you as a council to look at the centralization of courts. So that's a little bit more context of how it is that we're here.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for this. I know this is difficult because you're balancing two very important priorities. One is the sanity of residents in their homes, and the other is the incredible popularity and benefits of a healthy activity that folks derive a lot of pleasure from. So I'm going to support this because I've dealt with I mean, any one of us here around this table with residents who have had their quality of life severely impacted by measures outside of their control, and the enjoyment of their home is greatly diminished. And I mean, we can't have that. We can't have that. It's not right. So I'm going to ask that this motion be split when we vote, Madam Chair. So if we could vote on 1 and 2 separately, please. I've been told by staff we have a very difficult budget season ahead of us with hard decisions to make. And although I think our Parks and Rec have been historically underfunded, and we definitely need to increase our offerings to our residents. I don't want to vote for this right now, not having seen the capital budget, as Councillor Kent just kind of mentioned. I'd want to make sure that we are keeping all options open if we're going to have a very difficult decision-making process ahead of us. So I would just ask that we split the vote when it comes to that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. I am at this point going to ask for a motion to extend the time of the meeting, please. I don't think we're going to get to the end. Okay, thank you, Councillor Purdy, and seconded by Councillor Cuddle. I will ask for the indulgence of the committee to pose a question, some questions, and make some comments before we move to the next round. Thank you. I have a number of questions concerning the proposed relocation if we don't split the motion. One is, did you consider the proximity to the Pallet Village? Maybe you can speak to that. The Pallet Village, which will soon become operational next to the Canada Games Centre on Thomas Riddell Drive. Also, the impact on trails and trailheads and future trails for the Mainland Common area. I know that's a key priority of the Halifax West Trails Association, and I'm concerned that we may not have had adequate consultation and discussion with them, particularly with the proposed development around the Regency Park Drive and what impact that will have on populations, etc. So just I'd like a few answers to some of those questions. I know that we have a very active volunteer group, the Halifax West Trails Association, that has been spending a lot of time building trails for the enjoyment of the community, and I would not like to see access to those trails in any way impacted. And then finally, if we were to split the motion, then where does that leave the pickleball players? Because I think all of us support an active lifestyle, and we like to promote wellness wellness, and we think it's really important for our communities. So what would happen if we were to split the motion and just have, you can't play pickleball here, but we're not giving you any other options? So just a few questions. Thank you.
To the chair. So yes, the pallet shelter community was considered as part of the review of potential sites, and potential being the key word. Nothing is set in stone as where this would be set within the common of any significance, or even if it is end up in the common. So we're still investigating at that stage, but it looks like an ideal potential candidate at various points that could accommodate pickleball courts. It's safe to say. In terms of the pallet shelter community, yes, there was a site visit and investigation undertook late summer. Just prior, actually, to kind of the word spreading about the community coming in and so on. So there were about potentially 6 ideal locations that were looked at, and we've kind of made a few of those redundant based on the setbacks not meeting that community. So yes, we did consider that, and the 2 that were kind of shown as possible options on the slides, those would be over 200 meters away from the pallet shelter community. So for that one. Your question regarding the, go back to me about the trails. So in terms of the Trails Association, in terms of engagement in general, there's been a little bit with the Pickleball Nova Scotia community in terms of just the Castle Hill issue itself. But on a go-forward basis, if we get the go-ahead, we would do a detailed investigation with consulting stakeholders and proper site placement and proper design. That hasn't been done yet. It's more just an initial investigation, say, look, we could have spots here. We are aware of the trails as well, especially in the areas of both those options we were showing. We know the trail network, and I think there was a new connection made recently through there. So yes, we are aware of that, but that detail would come through the consultation through the next step on that one as well. The splitting the motion question, not that one. Yeah.
So splitting the motion does this. The first motion deals with Castle Hill. So that's what that motion deals with. The second motion deals with what you want to do as a committee to recommend something by way of the budget and the idea of earmarking some new regional courts for the mainland common. Effectively, what that does is you're making that recommendation to regional council. Regional council needs to approve it. And what that does is it identifies to staff that it should be included for budgetary consideration. At that time, as you consider the budget, you can look at various different line items. You have a choice, or council will have the choice, of course, as to what it is that it wants to include, not include, or otherwise. But that's essentially what you would be doing as a committee. You'd be saying this is worthwhile to council to have earmarked as a project to allow for that consideration in the budget, and we would include it within the budget. So that's the way that would basically work.
I don't know if I'm still on my 5 minutes, but I'll just ask this question of clarity because I think it'll help us all move forward. The question is, so it's a possibility that we would approve one with no option. We wouldn't spend the $30,000 that could possibly make Armstrong Court more viable for the short term until other options came on side. Once again, putting a priority on active lifestyle.
I think the matter of other courts are outside of what this staff report is actually containing. You could, well, first of all, we would always look at other alternatives. We would look at existing courts and otherwise. I think it's fair to say that we have looked at courts, and without some sort of mitigative measures, they aren't really, if you like, in play. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't, even outside of a budget or even beside a budget year, not look at what alternatives would be. We would continue to look at those things. We just simply believe that the best route to go is to plan for regional facilities, and that's why the second part of the staff report motion is before you.
Thank you. Councillor Saint-Amand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a difficult choice before us because we're talking about removing 4 courts, and having had conversations with, I'm not a pickleball player myself. I aspire to be at some point, but I'm not there yet. But I've been speaking with a couple of members of this community, and the demand is clearly high. I mean, that's the reason that this particular pickleball court is so active. And so the idea of removing that inventory without, granted, we know that we can't spin up a new facility terribly quickly. And the Armstrong court, were it to be converted just for 2 courts as opposed to 4, not using the entire space, would be just barely shorter than the setback that we're aspiring to using the Vancouver model. And it seems to me that other mitigation measures could be put in place to make that even more acceptable potentially. Could that not be used as a stopgap measure, even on a temporary basis? What bugs me is that wasn't presented as one of the staff alternatives. The alternative that was presented in the staff report was outright reject the recommendation, or just completely wait until there's an entirely new facility. There was nothing in between those 2 options aside from the budgetary side of things. Couldn't we look at giving them an alternative to play, try it out, given that it's, we go from 12 meters to 45 meters in the setback alone? Couldn't there be the potential that could buy us a little bit of time, so that in the event that we do wind up being able to build a new facility, they're not waiting quite as long to be able to get back to play?
So, and Vice Chair, it's outside the purview. It's outside the what's contained in the staff report. But you could potentially, as a committee, make another recommendation to council, which would have us explore alternative measures in the next coming budget season, which could include mitigating measures such as sound barriers in different courts within the same catchment area. I certainly don't know at this particular point whether that would make a difference, but it would direct us as staff to consider those measures. If we are dealing with expensive sound barriers or otherwise, after we consider that, we would likely put that within our capital budget. It would be a small matter, of course. So that could be an added motion that you could make as a stopgap measure for the next coming season, I would suppose.
But with the staff report calling for either outright either close this one down and approve a budget to build an as yet unrealized new central location, versus ignore that and keep this one in play and investigate other mitigation measures, why couldn't the staff report have suggested an alternative location that also similarly explored sound mitigation measures at that alternative location while shutting down the original location? I guess that's the piece that I'm missing. Is it feels like we kind of have an either or when there might have been room for something in between.
Through the chair to the councillor, there may be a bit of a gap, I suppose, but I think part of this was also to do with court centralization. I think that's the part that's getting lost a little bit in terms of the initiative here, is that ideally, on a go-forward basis, it'd be nice to centralize courts to maybe a larger complex than what we have, sporadically a few courts here and there, with appropriate setbacks too. So kind of twofold: is the setback is one, and 2 is centralizing. So that was the effort in the area. Now, it wouldn't involve closing their courts or anything of that nature at this time. It's just a matter of as a go-forward basis. I do get your point about the kind of year gap where we're losing 4 courts. I do understand for sure, but that was the way the staff report was kind of presented, in that twofold fashion of centralization and the setbacks.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Cattell.
We
go. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's been clarified, but I just did want to note that in the staff report, it does show that this originated from regional council, a motion from regional council, and often things that originate at regional council get directed to the standing committees for further consideration and discussion before being recommended back up to regional council. So the process that is being followed here, in my experience, is the common one of how we do these things, so that we can have this good debate here, have this discussion, be focused on the issues, and then make a recommendation back to regional council on it. You know, I get the point about you know, the investment in new courts, but I think it's important to note that we've had a big surge in population, a big surge in demand for recreational facilities. Regardless of whether we are losing this one court or not, I think that there was enough demand to go forward with looking at additional pickleball courts. I know that I get calls from pickleball players and the league and there's an association on a regular basis looking for opportunities to build more pickleball courts. So, you know, I would say even if Castle Hill continued to exist, I am actually pleased to see that there is a proposal for additional pickleball courts coming, and that I think that, you know, back to the services and the recreational amenities in our city, this makes sense. It's you know, we don't have enough facilities and courts right now to serve the population. So you know, and I haven't seen the capital plan either. I know I have been in discussion with Parks staff myself about the need for pickleball courts, and then that will follow the process through the capital plan and the Parks planning. So I have faith in that, but I think this is an opportunity to you know, address two things here. One is the ongoing and significant issues that have been experienced at Castle Hill. With the noise, I can appreciate that 100%, and also support Councillor Morris in wanting to see this pickleball court removed. And I also am very supportive of the second part of the motion about going ahead. Just in terms of process, I don't know if the solicitor or Maggie or Richard or anybody here could talk about the process, that if we do make this motion, it still needs to get through regional council in terms of budget. It still needs to go through the budget process. There's always the opportunity down the road in the next few months to decide, like, if we want to take it off that budget if it's too much. But I think at this point, it's you know, just given all the things that have been said in terms of the need and demand, that, you know, let's move this forward to regional council. Let's get it on the budget, and then we can have that discussion when we have a more fulsome picture of what the capital plan looks like. Thank you.
I'll turn it to the executive director.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the councillor. That's correct. It would be a proposed item within the capital budget, which would be then debated by budget committee and council further. So council ultimately will have the decision making with respect to whether or not to include that going forward in the budget.
Thank you, and I will go to Councillor Kent. And my apologies if I misread there.
That's okay, Madam Chair. All good. So I was going to ask for this to be split as well. I can't vote for something that is adding to the budget without knowing what's in the budget. I really can't. You know, it used to be when we have a better, I think we've had a better council for approaches and better service, better processes for approaching the budget, and I really appreciate that coming back to council. We used to call it a bun fight, where everybody was, you know, and we are all interested in making sure that our districts are served well. But this is a major, you know, it's a regional approach. I'm happy to have this motion take out the recommendation, and it'll be in council. I'd rather address it there, so I'm not going to support the recommendation from here. I feel more inclined to support the removal of the pickleball problem because it really is problematic, and I don't want to be that counselor that doesn't recognize that for residents, because I know that it potentially could be in any one of our districts, and the quality of life that is interfered with by this is significant. So I can vote in favor of it, but it's I'm still struggling with how this was brought forward and how this was done. I understand that it came from regional council, but putting the two together to me, which is the request for funding to support the mainland common change as we go into the budget deliberation, I struggle with it for a very specific, very district-centered issue. That's what I have a problem with. So I'm going to, I can vote in, I wish I had the counselor here, but I can vote in favor of removing those. I wonder if there's some terminology though to add an amendment to it, which is to ensure that there are all, I guess because you've put it in an option. Staff are recommending an option that I look forward to having an opportunity at council to review. Yeah, this is tricky because of the way I think it's been kind of positioned here, and as Councillor Cuddle and we've all been saying, there's not a good result. I'll just add though that there's almost 40 other courts that these folks can go to. It's not uncommon for districts like mine to our activities have to all leave our community and go to somewhere else to do a lot of these things.
Excuse me,
Thank
Councillor Kent, you're out of time by a bit.
I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just on that point, I mean, whether we vote in favor of number 2 and the recommendation, I mean, staff can still, it's their prerogative to bring it into the capital process anyway through their parks capital plan. So whether we vote for it today or not, it's kind of a moot point. I'm just on Councillor St. Amon's point there, because you can only speak twice. I would like to propose an amendment to direct staff to look at using the alternative, looking at the sound barrier equipment as a stopgap between shutting down these and the construction of the new. And so I don't know the wording on that there, Simon. You might want to help me with that, but.
Just want to check with our solicitor regarding format.
An amendment to the motion.
Based on my understanding, that sounds like it would be possibly an alternative rather than an amendment to the motion on the floor, which would probably the best form there would be to defeat. I believe it would be.
But I'm not wanting to defeat the motion.
Right.
I want to add an amendment. A supplemental to be included when this comes back to regional council. Okay, then I ask for a supplemental.
That would also raise a certain issue about where the report would be bound to, where the community council, I believe, could request a supplemental report for itself. I'm not sure if we could request a supplemental report, make a recommendation to regional council, and then also request that a supplemental report go to regional council.
Be attached to this.
But I'm going to pause, and potentially we may want to consider a pause just to discuss this with staff and some options.
So to the Vice Chair, what I understand that you are doing is adding something new, which I think you can do by way of recommendation. I think what you're doing is you're directing the Chief Administrative Officer to review the implementation of sound barriers and other similar measures upon existing courts in the mainland common area for the 25-26 budget year. No?
The other court that is around the corner.
You're not looking to do this within Castle Hill. You're looking to do this on other courts.
The court that was recommended to.
Okay.
Your mic.
Pause? Good.
Yeah, your mic wasn't.
Oh, okay. I can't tell when it comes on. I can't see it. It's where it is. I can't see it. Yeah, I have to put it down over there. So we need a.
Well, for 4 years, red meant go and green meant
Thank you, everyone, for your patience as we get organized to bring forward a new motion. Okay.
Okay.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would like to move that the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee direct the CAO to review other sites as replacements to the Castle Hill Park Court with measures that may include sound barriers for the 2025-26 budget year.
Second.
Thank you. So just to that point, we understand the demand of pickleball and our growing community, and that we are underserviced for the demand in our population. So I think this is a good stopgap measure for the interim, so that we're not leaving the pickleball community without courts, but we're also helping to resume people's quality of life in their homes, because that can be tremendously tormenting for folks. They don't have other places to go. That's their home. So we need to be very mindful of that moving forward. I'm glad that that was pointed out today, that that is going to be now under consideration for all new infrastructure. Perfect. Wonderful. And thank you. I hope we can move this forward.
We'll now hear from Maggie McDonald, Executive Director.
Just wanted, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to clarify that that's an addition to, that's an amendment to the existing motion, so that would be effectively number 3 in those in that motion. Thank you.
Councillor Saint-Amand.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Purdy. Took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I wanted to see happen. Sadly, I'd already used my time last time, so I think this is just an opportunity for this body to take a reasonable step to be able to make this community whole, or at least keep it as whole as it possibly can be when they're waiting for larger facilities and more dedicated facilities that meet the community's longer term requirements to be put into play. So I completely support this new amendment.
I saw Catherine Morse's name pop up here. Councillor Cuddle? No? Okay. It was a gremlin. Thank you.
Is there still a desire to split the main? Okay. Yep.
So I'm wondering if we can see the motion that we're voting on the screen. The first component of it. No. Yes. Yes. Okay. If everyone is comfortable and can read it on the paper, perhaps we can move forward with the question.
Just a moment. Bear with me.
Yes.
Does that do it? No. Okay. What we're going to want to do this. maybe what's best is if I can make some printouts and just circulate those for a moment.
Could I?
Yeah.
Maybe perhaps I could suggest that we just have someone read.
Yeah. How about I just read the 3 parts of the motion, and we can consider those and vote on them separately. So, part 1 of the motion is to remove the pickleball court markings and nets from the courts at Castle Hill Park. 2, include funding. Okay, that is the first one, so we'll have that one now.
Okay. So we'll call for the question. All those in support of the motion, please raise their,
That
okay.
one passes.
The motion, okay. And then we'll move to the second motion, or the second component of the motion, please.
So just to read that aloud, to be clear, part 2 of the motion is include funding within the proposed 2025-26 capital budget for the design of pickleball courts within Mainland Common as outlined within the staff report dated September 20, 2024.
Okay, I'll call for the question. All those, I thought we had already moved that. Yeah. So I call for the question. Yes. So I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by raising your hands, please. Okay. And all those contrary minded? So the motion was defeated. This component of the motion was defeated. So we'll move to the addition to the motion, and we'll call for the question now. And all those in favor, okay.
So I'll just read the part 3 of the motion just to confirm that Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee direct the CAO to review other sites as replacements to the Castle Hill Park Court with measures that may include sound barriers for the 2025-26 budget year.
Okay. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Contrary minded, raise your hand. The motion has passed. Oh. Where are we? Okay. A motion. Are we at a motion to adjourn? Oh, right.
Schedule as outlined in the staff memorandum.
Second.
Yeah.
No. Yes.
By raising your hand. Contrary minded, raise your hand. Okay. My mic is playing tricks. In camera, none. Added items, none. Any notices of motion? Could I have a motion for, could we have a motion for adjournment, please? Yes. I think we just approved the schedule. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
The meeting adjourned at 12:37. Thank you.